When you hear the name Sparta, what comes to mind? Is it King Leonidas and his 300 holding the hot gates of Thermopylae against an empire? For centuries, the Spartans were synonymous with martial prowess, discipline, and being the most feared warriors in all of Greece. They were known for valuing action over words, giving rise to the term laconic. Sparta reached the height of its power after their victory over Athens in 404 BCE. But perhaps the most enduring symbol of their confidence was this. Unlike nearly every other major Greek city-state, Sparta never bothered to build walls around its city during its prime. Their philosophy held that their only necessary defense was their men, not mortar. Yet this powerful image, the invincible warrior society, the ultimate symbol of martial prowess, is what historians call the Spartan Mirage. This idealized view was often fabricated or filtered through the eyes of non-Spartan writers like Plutarch and Xenophon, who used Sparta to critique the chaos of Athenian democracy. The truth is, if you visited Sparta after it was deserted, a future visitor looking upon its simple ruins would struggle to believe the power it once wielded, as the city was not adorned with magnificent temples or public edifices. The city itself was nothing more than 4 humble villages in a valley. We must look past the mirage to understand the historical Sparta, a society built on conquest, defined by fear, and ultimately consumed by the very system designed to make it invincible. The foundation of Spartan strength lay in the rigorous, state-run military education program known as the Agoge. This process was designed to strip away individual identity and forge a boy into a perfect cog in the Spartan war machine. The training began early. Upon birth, a council of elders examined the infant for defects. Some legends claim unfit babies were thrown from Mount Taygetus, though recent research suggests the Spartans may have been more compassionate. If a child did have a disability, however, it is unlikely they could complete the training regimen. At the age of 7, every Spartan boy was voluntarily surrendered to the state by his parents. They were organized into groups called packs, or agelai. The goal of the Agoge was to instill absolute discipline, physical toughness, and an unwavering loyalty to Sparta that superseded everything else: family, wealth, or power. The training regimen was relentless and harsh. Boys were poorly fed, encouraged to steal to survive, but severely punished if they were caught, not for the theft, but for the lack of skill and getting away with it, teaching them cunning and stealth. They were forced to go barefoot and wore only a single cloak per year. Physical contests and fighting among the boys were encouraged to foster aggression. Ritualized beatings, such as the public flogging at the altar of Artemis Orthia, known as the diamastigosis, served as public tests of endurance, sometimes proving fatal. The legendary tale of a boy who allowed a stolen fox to tear out his entrails rather than cry out demonstrates the extreme value placed on pain tolerance and stoicism. Spartan women also received a state-sponsored education that included rigorous athletic training, literacy, and music. This was not proto-feminism, but a pragmatic calculation. Strong, healthy women were needed to produce strong, healthy babies, the future soldiers of Sparta. Upon completing the Agoge at age 20, a man became a full-time professional soldier. It was these elite combat skills and blind dedication that made Spartan warriors so deadly.
If Spartiate citizens were the bronze shield, the foundation they rested on was absolute slavery. The economic engine of Sparta was driven by the Helots, a whole class of people enslaved and owned communally by the Spartan state. They were descendants of the populations conquered in Laconia and Messenia. The conquest of Messenia and protracted wars provided Sparta with vast agricultural estates and the massive Helot labor force needed to support the citizen class. The Helots labored in the fields for centuries, providing the agricultural surplus needed for Spartan citizens to dedicate their entire existence exclusively to military training. Here is the great paradox. The system that gave Spartans their leisure and power also trapped them in constant fear. The Helots vastly outnumbered their masters by a ratio of at least 7-to-1. Aristotle described the Helots as an enemy constantly sitting in wait for the disasters of the Spartans. This pervasive paranoia dictated the very structure of the Spartan state, known as the cosmos. Government. Sparta used a unique mixed constitution with 2 hereditary kings, the Gerousia, or Council of Elders, and the Ephors, or Overseers. The 5 annually elected Ephors eventually became the most powerful body, controlling the Agoge and directing foreign policy, acting as a crucial check on the kings. Institutionalized terror. To maintain control, the Spartans institutionalized terror. Every year, the newly elected Ephors formally declared war on the Helots, which legally sanctioned the killing of any Helot by a Spartan at any time. The Krypteia. The state deployed the Krypteia, a form of secret police composed of young Agoge graduates who were sent into the countryside to patrol, terrorize, and assassinate any Helot who showed signs of leadership. The constant need to police this massive internal enemy made the Spartan leadership conservative and hesitant to commit their army to long campaigns far from home. Sparta's reputation was cemented during the Persian Wars, 499 to 449 BCE. King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans, alongside other Greeks, held Xerxes' forces at Thermopylae. Their sacrifice bought time for Greece to organize and eventually repel the Persians. Following the decisive victory at the Battle of Plataea in 479 BCE, Sparta was solidified as the preeminent military power in Greece. 50 years later, tensions between the democratic naval power of Athens and the oligarchic land power of Sparta escalated into the devastating Peloponnesian War, 431 to 404 BCE. After nearly 3 decades of conflict, Sparta, with crucial funding and naval assistance from Persia, defeated Athens at the Battle of Agoge in 404 BCE. This victory left Sparta as the undisputed master of Greece. However, even as the dominant force, Sparta was already collapsing from within. Their greatest strength, their reliance on an exclusive full-time warrior class, became their downfall. The disease was Oliganthropia, the shortage of full Spartiate citizens. The relentless wars, though often victories, cost Sparta enormous amounts of citizen warriors. The population declined by over half, from around 9,000 to 4,000 citizens between its height and the Battle of Leuctra. This was exacerbated by self-inflicted wounds. 1. Wealth inequality. The ideal of Lycurgan equality was a myth. Wealth became concentrated. Citizens were required to supply their own armor to participate in the Agoge. As families became poorer, they couldn't afford the necessary equipment, making their children ineligible for military training and eventually stripping them of their citizenship status. 2. Rigidity. Sparta desperately needed to grow its population, but refused to abandon the strict rules that kept citizenship exclusive to certain bloodlines. This meant they had to rely heavily on less trained outsiders to supplement their armies. 3. Greed. Spartan leaders grew greedy, forgetting their traditional values and focusing on accumulating personal wealth rather than strengthening the state. The declining number of full Spartiates made it impossible to field armies of their former size or effectively police the vast Helot population. By 375 BCE, things had become dire with uprisings across Greece.
Sparta's arrogance following its victory over Athens fostered deep resentment, and the city-state of Thebes emerged as a powerful rival. In 371 BCE, Spartan forces under King Cleombrotus confronted the Theban army, commanded by the brilliant general Epaminondas, at the Battle of Leuctra. Cleombrotus commanded just over 10,000 men, but due to Oliganthropia, only about 700 of these were true Spartan warriors. Epaminondas knew the Spartan strategy. They had used the same phalanx tactics for hundreds of years. The traditional Spartan phalanx was set up 12 men deep, with the elite troops placed on the right wing. Epaminondas revolutionized Greek warfare. First, he abandoned the even line. Second, he massed his best soldiers, including the elite sacred band of Thebes, into a massive column 50 ranks deep on his left wing, positioning them directly opposite the small contingent of Spartan elite on the enemy's right. Third, he advanced this reinforced wing in an oblique order, concentrating overwhelming power on that single point. The massive weight and momentum of the Theban column shattered the traditional Spartan line. King Cleombrotus was killed. Crucially, the Spartans lost approximately 400 of the 700 Spartiates present. It was the first time Sparta had lost a major battle in recent memory, and the myth of invincibility was broken. Leuctra was a catastrophe for the already depleted citizen body. Epaminondas pressed his advantage, invading Spartan territory, and in 370 BCE delivered the final fatal blow. He liberated Messenia. The loss of Messenia deprived Sparta of the vast majority of its Helot labor force and nearly half its land, destroying the entire economic foundation that supported the professional Spartan soldier class. The Peloponnesian League dissolved, and former allies and Helots rose up. Sparta lingered on as an independent city-state for over a century, relying on outsiders and minor raiding. The reforms of its final kings, such as Nabis, failed to stem the tide of collapse. By 195 BCE, they were defeated by an alliance led by Rome. The civilization that had once held Xerxes at bay could not repel the might of Rome. By the time Rome allowed Sparta nominal independence, the city had lost almost everything that made their civilization unique. Finally, in 267 CE, the city was sacked by the Goths, sealing the fall of one of the greatest Greek empires that ever existed. Sparta's story is not just one of heroic sacrifice, but a cautionary tale. The collapse was a systemic failure caused by an exclusive, rigid system that prioritized internal security over adaptation and ultimately destroyed its own citizen base. The Spartans had overextended themselves, and the cost of every victory was measured in irreplaceable men. The secret fear, the fear of the Helots, forced them into a system that, paradoxically, ensured their dramatic demise.